All right, we'll go ahead and finish up medium and high frequency with key topic 16. And there we also have emission selection. So let's get through these last few questions, and I think we'll have had a successful day. For much of the 20th century, that's the last century, 200 or 500 kilohertz was the primary international distress frequency. Was it? Okay. We haven't touched on that at all. Its use has been phased out in favor of the GMDSS. Some of the distress frequencies are permitted for calling other stations to establish contact whereupon the stations move to another frequency. Such channels are known as the distress, safety, and calling frequencies. So we already saw most of these. VHF, channel 70, and channel 16 for radio telephony. And then the 6 medium or high frequency channels, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 16. Anything else on here we should be worried about? Maybe you might notice that each one does have a very close neighbor that is set up for digital purposes, but they're also 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16. The international distress frequencies currently in use are 2182 kilohertz for medium range, which is what is shown on the screen. Several high frequency channels exist, and you see the 5 there, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 16. Then they talk about the VHF, channel 16, 156.8. And now they're also talking about, since it's over 300, it must be in the next. So if we're in very high frequency, the next one up was extremely high frequency. Is that what it is, or ultra? Does extreme or ultra come next? I guess they're not telling us. I should have looked it up ahead. UHF or EHF? I think it's just UHF. 406 and 406.1 is used by the COSPAS SARSAT International Satellite-Based Search and Rescue. And that's what the SAR, Search and Rescue Satellite. We saw that on the list of frequencies. That's one, we need the higher frequency in order to talk with the satellites. So that's why they moved, or they added another international frequency, distress frequency. So we've had a number. I guess we started at 500. Then we went to 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 12,000, 16,000. Then we moved into 156,000 or 100. I probably said that wrong. I did. I definitely like this screen. I should use it more often. There's some more buttons I could actually point to. There's a clarifier. 2182 has its own dedicated button. Okay. What is the medium frequency radio telephony calling and distress frequency? All right, some of these are repeats, so you might just slide through this test with just seeing a lot of repeats. So, well, this one's kind of a funny question because they're asking, what is the medium frequency? And then two of the options are very high frequency. So that is not even going to be in the medium frequency band. So B and D, I wouldn't look at those too hard at all because The question is calling for medium frequency. So what the other two are in the medium frequency, the kilohertz, they're under 3,000 kilohertz, so they're in the medium frequency. Was it 2670? I don't even think we saw that one. Or is it 2182, which we did see over and over again? I guess we also saw a digital equivalent, which I think was 218 points or 2187 point something. So this one here is probably should have been in a prior key topic, but it is in this one, so maybe you'll get it. If that's the case, wonderful. 2182. All right, they make the same observation I do. They're saying kilohertz is abbreviated small k, capital H, Z. And megahertz is capital M, where each one is capitalized. And that does make a big difference in your log keeping. 313 frequencies for use in distress communications. Basically, it refers to a table, which I included here. And you can see the frequency band of 2182 kilohertz. All the other megas are in a higher frequency. And these three are all in very high frequency, VHF. So 2182, just to remind you, you can see the emission is a J3E, and it is in the medium frequency band. 2182 kilohertz forms an essential part of the GMDSS. It has the associated DSC frequency 2187.5. Other international distress frequencies in use as of 2008. So I guess this should be brought up to date. That's 15 years ago. Include 21.5 megahertz, and then the double of that. I think that is a there's a term when they double it like that. It's almost like you go up to the next octave, but it is not that. That's the civil aircraft emergency frequency. 243 military. 156.8, that's our international channel 16 VHF. And then 406, that's the newer into the UHF band for communicating with satellites. Subsection 116, when you're calling a ship station, basically they're giving here the list of the ship stations that have working frequencies. So you can actually use 2003, 2142, 2638, 2738, or 2830 kilohertz as a working frequency. So maybe most of the larger ships, they're using one of these working frequencies. And if you want to talk to the larger ship and you know them, you've talked to them before, you know what working frequency that they're monitoring, you can just call them directly on their working frequency. So if you don't know that, you must first establish communication with other ship stations by call and reply on 2182, which is our medium frequency distress channel. 2, except when other operating procedures are used, the frequency 156.8, the channel 16, must be used for call and reply by ship stations and maritime utility stations before establishing communication on one of the intership working frequencies. Okay, I think that's more of the same of what we've already looked at. Question is, on what frequency would a vessel normally call another ship station when using a radio telephony emission? All right, so what frequency are you going to select? You got a lot of frequencies to pick from. Which one you want to call a vessel? So where are you going to, where would you look? or what channel would you use? Uh, A, only on 2182 kilohertz in ITU, International Telecommunications Union, Region 2. Or B, on 2182 kilohertz or channel 16, unless the station knows that the called vessel maintains a simultaneous watch on another intership working frequency. Wow, whenever they're structured like that, you know that something's going on. C, on the appropriate calling channel of the ship station at 15 minutes past the hour. What if it's 17? You just missed it. You have to wait another hour? No. D, on the vessel's unique working radio channel assigned by the FCC. Well, you don't really get a unique working radio channel. There's too many ships and not enough channels. So basically, we share the airwaves. So it's going to be A or B. Why they're saying that we only have to be in a region 2, which they're not even sure what that is. That maybe that relates to C area 2, but I don't know right offhand. I do like number B, especially since they went on and explained this exception, this unless, which does seem to line up with the regulation. So B. So those two are not only distress frequencies, they're also calling frequencies. So if you do not know the intership working frequency in advance, make your call on a calling frequency. When you get a response, ask about the intership frequency and move to it. Yes, what's your intership frequency? A radio watch is the act of listening on a designated frequency for any possible incoming messages. Which 116B I think I gave you up here. Yeah, 116B, calling ship stations. A is calling shore stations. And then 5 is definitions. Okay, a little bit about simplex, duplex again. Simplex, you're using a single frequency. You can only transmit at any one point in time. Communications equipment designed for simplex operations use one antenna, and that is switched to either transmitter or receiver. Basically, if you have the button down to transmit, the antenna is switched to a transmitting antenna. If you let up on the button, the antenna reverts back to the receive. They call that a changeover relay or switch. Duplex operation, also known as paired frequencies, that allows simultaneous transmissions from two different frequencies through the use of two widely spaced antennas, or one antenna connected to the transmitter and receiver through special combining and filtering circuitry. Duplex channels are normally used for public correspondence purposes, so it's like a radio telephone call. Two separate frequencies, one for transmit, one for receive. They work the same way as telephone calls, that over the landline type system, where both parties can speak and be heard of at the same time. And from the little illustration above, it looks like there's an antenna, because certainly your handheld only has one antenna. But if you are talking in duplex, it's there's a relay type antenna which makes a split for you. But a walkie-talkie, the same way. Frequencies between stations, are they paired or unpaired? In effect, simplex or duplex? Well, ship to ship is simplex, ship to private shore is simplex, private shore to ship, simplex, private shore, simplex. It looks like the only time it goes to duplex is when it is the public shore. Certainly the public shore to another public shore, or a public shore to a ship, or a public shore to a private shore are all in the duplex mode. But the others, ship to ship and ship to a private shore station, are in simplex, in reverse. All right, for general communication purposes, simplex frequencies are A, normally used between ship stations and private coast stations. B, normally used with public coast stations. Or C, normally used between ship stations. Or, crazy enough, both A and C are correct. That's between ship stations and private coast stations. All right. Simplex was the one between ship to ship, ship to private, private station, coast station, or private coast to the ship. So the only time you actually used duplex was with the public. So I'm going to eliminate B, because simplex is only used for ship and private coast. So A and C, I guess D could be correct. It's an odd way of phrasing the question, but it is the correct answer. Most public coast stations operate duplex. All right, for general communication purposes, paired frequencies are, is that pretty much the same? For general communication purposes, simplex frequencies are. For general communication purposes, paired frequencies are. All right, so basically the difference from this is simplex or paired frequencies, which I'm not going to tell you basically what paired frequencies means, but if you know it, you should be able to answer this question. Paired frequencies, are they normally used with private coast stations? Are they normally used between ships? Or are they normally used between private coast and ship stations? Or are they normally used with public coast stations? Paired frequencies. All right, well, again, private and ship are simplex, public is the duplex. Duplex is the other word for paired frequencies. So D. I'm just going to relaunch this while I've got it. That way it doesn't distract you on the screen. No. All right. What emission must be used when operating on the medium frequency distress and calling voice frequency? All right, we've only got a couple more before we get out of this medium and high frequency group. As you can see, if we don't know anything about it, we would just be guessing. So luckily we know a little bit about these numbers here. So you want to use, I see the word voice, so I'm going to look for an E at the end of the emission. And so far, 3 of them have an E at the end, so that's not going to narrow it down too far for me. Medium frequency distress and calling voice frequency. J3E, is that the single sideband suppressed carrier modulation or telephony? Well, that certainly does seem to be our go-to answer, but let's see what the other ones say. A1A, on-off keying without modulation by the audio frequency. So what, you're going to sit there and turn the switch on and off to modulate? I'm not sure what they mean there. F3E, frequency modulation telephony. Well, frequency modulation is short for FM, and no, because we're going to be using the distress emissions. We're going to be basically doing the single sideband. So frequency modulation, I'm going to say no to. A3E, amplitude modulation, for the same reason I'm going to say no to that one also. They're using both sidebands, double sideband. I don't know if it's actually referred to that. Just AM. But no, you wouldn't actually go on your AM or FM transmitter to transmit a distress call. You would go on your single sideband and do the distress call. So J3E. And that's right. And if you remember, it must be subsection 313, the 2182 kilohertz, you do use the J3E emission. And I believe, and we do know 2182 is the medium frequency distress and calling voice frequency. So the emission is J3E from the table that is in the regulation. Okay. All right, this is the last one. I didn't really get to it a little bit as far as trying to explain it. I've done a little research and I can't seem to find anything that ties it exactly. ITU is the International Telecommunications Union, and they are the unit, the international unit that assigns all the frequencies. Now they do use some shorthand in order to describe some of their channels. And you can see the question is asking about ITU channel 1212 or 1212, however you actually read it. Which of the channels does that seem to represent? Is it A, channel 12 in the 16 megahertz band? B, channel 1216 in the medium frequency band? Is it C, the 12th channel in the 12 megahertz band? Or is it the first channel in the 12 megahertz band? This one is almost hard to write a wrong answer for, because just by looking at them, it certainly looks like it would be C, the 12th channel in the 12th megahertz band, because they're asking what's 1212. And since we didn't really cover it, I'd say that's our best answer. Yeah, that's our best answer. There it is, and it is the right answer. So I guess I don't really need to have an education slide on this too much. High frequency channels, usually duplex, are abbreviated with a 3 or 4 digit number. The first or the second digits indicate the megahertz band. So ITU channel 1212 would indicate the 12th channel in the 12 megahertz band. Oh, is that how they come up with channels? Okay, I kind of see what they're talking about. Simple high frequency channels are another story. The high frequency channels may illustrate the band megahertz, simply followed by the letters S for simplex, Keep your ITU channel list handy. That's what I was looking for on the internet. I can't. I Google ITU channel list, and that I do not get something like this. I get the standard channels. All marine medium frequency and high frequency channels are operated in the upper sideband. So it is going to be a single sideband, and they do use the upper. The single one is the upper, not the lower. All right, that wraps up that presentation.